Hi, and welcome to Quarantine Cocktails with Chad and Nicole. We're excited to have you guys here today to talk about the Negroni, a classic cocktail from Italy. The origins of the Negroni go back to 1919 in Florence. It's actually a revision of an earlier cocktail that was documented in Arnaldo Strucci's book in 1907. The Il Vermouth di Torino was the name of the book. And the drink was originally called Vermouth al Bitter o Americano. I'm butchering that, wow. But essentially it combined Campari with sweet vermouth and soda water. And that eventually became known as the Americano, even though that drink was probably not drunk very extensively in America at the time, but it was sort of in honor of American cocktail making. And so it got the name Americano. The origin of the Negroni itself came about from the gentleman by the name of Count Camillo Negroni, who was an Italian count with some English blood, I'm told. And he was quite the world traveler and adventurer. He actually was in America for a period of time, and he had a number of different occupations as a banker, a cowboy, a professional gambler, and a fencing instructor. So he was quite a talented man. And it's told that he acquired his taste for stiff American-style drinks while he was a rodeo clown in Montana. So quite a colorful figure for a titled nobleman from Italy. He is said to have returned from America to Italy in around 1910, but the drink, as I said, traces to 1919 in Florence, where he asked his local barman at the Cassoni bar, a fellow by the name of Fosco Scarselli, to mix him an Americano, but to substitute the gin and substitute in gin for the soda water, giving a much stiffer drink. A man after Ernest Hemingway's heart, perhaps, per our discussion of the daiquiri last week. And that was the origin of the drink. And the Count apparently loved this cocktail so much that a letter from a friend the next year admonished him that he must not take more than 20 Negronis in a day. And I will also recommend that they are very delicious, but do not drink 20 in a day. No more than 20, please. So that's the cocktail, pretty elegant combination of three ingredients, and you'll note that they are all spirits. The cocktail made, and that will be important when we talk about it, the details of the drink later, but the cocktail made its way to Paris and started to filter out there, but its widespread adoption was probably hampered by the fascist period in Italy that extended through much of the 20s through to the end of World War II. So the cocktail really didn't begin to gather steam until the end of World War II, when Campari, one of the key ingredients, and the Negroni became closely associated with the period known as La Dolce Vita, which was kind of a celebratory, kind of bon vivant era in Italy after the end of fascism, with quite a bit of partying, celebrating, free love, even a little bit, and some things along those lines. So take it away.
Sure. So when Orson Welles first tried the Negroni in 1947, he was filming Black Magic in Rome. He said, "The bitters are excellent for your liver. The gin is bad for you, but they balance each other out." So I think it's a great quote. It also appears that is it Negroni?
A version of the Negroni.
a version of the Negroni in 1952 showed up on the menu of the Floridita bar in Havana, which we talked about last week with the daiquiri. And it was in the 1953 edition of the UK Bartender Guild's Guide to Drinks, where it appears as a drink served up without ice, interestingly enough.
Yeah, a different take on the drink.
Yeah. So, we have talked about the three ingredients in a Negroni. We know that the Negroni itself and Campari are pretty closely linked throughout history and today. So just a little bit about Campari itself. It's an Italian aperitivo. For those of you who don't know what that is, that means it's a before dinner drink. And the flavor profile for Campari, it's a bitter orange tasting drink, and it's got notes of cherry, clove, and cinnamon. It was invented in 1860 by a man by the name of Gaspar Campari, that's where the name comes from, in Novara, Italy. And it's said that the recipe itself is such a highly guarded secret recipe that only 3 people in the entire world know what it is. And it's so extensive, it's potentially over 80 ingredients long. So it's quite the, quite the
complex flavor combination.
Yeah, exactly. So, that's some lore there. Who knows what's
true?
Yeah. It's also known for its distinct red hue, you can see here, which was originally colored by carmine dye. So carmine dye was actually derived from crushed scaled insects originally. So that's what they used to give color to this beverage. They discontinued the use of the carmine dye just in 2006, so not that long ago. They now use artificial coloring, and that is on the label here.
Yes, and so it is artificial coloring, but it is vegan friendly now, so you can rest assured that your Negroni will be vegan.
No crushed insects
That's
anymore?
right, that's right.
You want to talk about?
Another aperitivo that you may be familiar with is Aperol. And we used Aperol in week 1 in our Old Pal Goes to Manhattan, or My Old Pal in Manhattan, or whatever we had that drink called. Campari is bolder and has more alcohol. It's about 20% alcohol, while Aperol, I think, is about 12%. And Aperol is a little bit sweeter and milder, not as bitter, both in the orange profile, though. And both are actually, while Aperol was produced originally by a different set of folks, is now owned by the Campari company, and so both are sold by Campari. The big uplift in Aperol sort of visibility lately has been a pretty big push by Campari, and so you have them to thank for the ubiquitous Aperol Spritz that has kind of become popular over the past few years. Mm-hmm. The Campari brand and Campari itself also became closely associated with artists, even dating back to the 20s, and that they've frequently done work with artists to do interesting advertising that includes the distinctive Campari bottle. And kind of giving Campari that sort of La Dolce Vita feel to it. It's a little bit Euro, it's a little bit countercultural, and kind of arty.
And some of the vintage posters you see around in calendars or sometimes in art galleries, a lot of those are these old vintage posters that Campari created. There's also a collection of them in the MoMA, the Museum of Modern Art in New York, which I think is interesting. Yeah. Campari itself in Italy also has an art gallery with a lot of these posters there as well.
So Campari has been a very sort of a big force of Italian, kind of propagating Italian culture and linking Italian culture in certain ways with, fine food, fine drinks. So Campari and Aperol themselves come under the general umbrella of Amaros, which simply means bitter in Italian. So Amaro, Amari would be actually the correct plural, although you'll hear many people say Amaros, and I will say that as well. And they're, essentially bitter liquors that have been infused with herbs and floral fruit essences that are often taken after dinner as digestives, although in the case of Campari and Aperol, they're considered to be aperitivos. But in any case, there's sort of a broad category of these Italian Amaros, of which we've incorporated Amaro Nonino as a adjunct to the Campari, even taking over the majority of the Campari in this particular formulation. So Amaro Nonino itself is a grappa-based, so here's the Nonino, it's a grappa-based Amaro, and that is not that old. It started getting produced in 1993, although the Nonino family and company have been making grappa since 1897. So grappa, by the way, is a brandy, harking back to our sidecar episode, and it's a grape-based brandy that's made specifically from the remainder of the winemaking process. So the remainder of the grapes after pressing is used to create grappa. It's often a clear spirit, but with the Amaro Nonino, it takes on this lovely amber hue with the various herbs and fruits that they distill with it. The Amaro Nonino is bittersweet, strong in citrus flavor, so it's in the same category, broad flavor profile as Campari and Aperol. It is a little bit stronger at 35% alcohol, and so this does make for a slightly an even stiffer version of the Negroni, but it's a little bit less bitter. Some Negroni purists will sort of probably be offended that we're presenting a version that's not sticking exactly to the classic Negroni recipe, but I happen to think that this is a delicious take on the Negroni. The Negroni has seen a number of different variations crop up. The classic recipe, just to present that fully, is the 1 ounce each of the 3 components, which is kind of nice to have this, because then it's actually very easy to mix in any size that you want, even if you don't have a measuring cup, a known size measuring cup, you can make the right proportions for your Negroni. You might end up with more or less than you wanted, but you'll get the right proportion. So there is something nice about that classic, 1-to-1-to-1 proportion of the drink. The traditional garnish for the Negroni is either orange peel or orange wheel. Some people also take a lemon twist, although some purists consider that to be a terrible heresy. The Negroni seems to spark, kind of like the martini, a certain amount of discussion around the exact right way to make the Negroni. Some other variations that you'll see include increasing the proportion of gin and bumping the gin up to as much as 2 parts gin to 1 part of each of the other. I believe the Stanley Tucci Negroni demo, I think he goes in that direction, and even suggests that you can incorporate some vodka in it. That really had some Negroni purists up in arms. In any case, and some other variations that we've touched on before include, say, the Boulevardier, where you take the gin out and replace it with bourbon. and the Boulevardier actually goes back to the 20s. It was documented in 1927. So that, probably got there by way from Italy through Paris, hence the Boulevardier name, harking to a Parisian magazine called Boulevardier.
True.
So I think at this point we are ready to shift over to demoing and talking a little bit about some of the technique items related to making the Negroni. Yeah. So here is the version that we are going to make, which we've called the OP Nonigroni, in honor of the inclusion of the Nonino. You'll see that we have gone a little bit away from the final sort of the 1:1:1 proportion. We bump up a little bit of the Amaro content, and we've substituted, as I said, a lot of the Campari with the Amaro Nonino. I think this gives it a rounder, a slightly less bitter profile, and I think kind of softens the drink a little bit. I certainly recommend, if you're at home and you don't have these ingredients, just going with a straight 1:1:1 with the Campari and giving that a try. Or if you're following along with this version, also try the original version and see what you think of them. I'm also going to mention here that we are using this particular Sipsmith gin. This is an English gin called Sipsmith, and they make this version called VJOP, which stands for Very Junipered Overproof. That means it's got a big, strong punch of the juniper, and it's also overproofed in that it comes in at 57% alcohol. But in the Negroni, having the overproof alcohol actually, I think, works out really well, and it's not as overpowering as you might think because the gin is really only 1/3 of the components there. I really like this gin in this drink. I think the strength of the juniper comes through, so you still get the juniper flavor punching through the strong, bitter and herbal qualities of the Amaros that we've incorporated. And I think the overproof gin actually holds up really well for this drink, which we're serving today in the sort of over a large ice cube. I mentioned we mentioned in the history portion that at some point it got served as in a coupe, although the original version was definitely over ice in a glass. And what are the differences between serving the drink in those two forms? Well, obviously in the coupe, it's not going to get diluted anymore after it's originally poured, but it's also going to lose its temp. It's going to warm up over time. And so if you're having your Negroni in a coupe, you probably want to enjoy it, a little bit faster than if you're serving it over an ice cube. One of the really nice properties of the Negroni actually is that it holds up well under a range of dilution. And so, for this version, I think serving it over ice, allowing it to really sip it. Don't think you need to drain this thing quickly. Please don't, because it's a pretty strong drink, especially as we're formulating it. But really allowing it to dilute further over time and still enjoy it as that dilution takes place, I think it gives you a great experience especially with this particular formulation. We finish up by garnishing it with a grapefruit peel rather than an orange peel. Sorry to the purists again, but that little bit of additional twist back towards the bitter after we've softened it with the Amaro Nonino is actually quite nice here as well. So that's our formulation. a little bit about sort of selection of ice versus coupe. If you're at home and you're enjoying it in your coupe, that's great. But we're going to build this one over our large ice cubes again. So we'll get you want to get those out, and I'll start mixing the drink. So with the Negroni and a lot of gin drinks that are fully spirit based, they can do quite well being prepared in advance and refrigerated as well and kept cold. This formulation actually lends itself to making a double helping because of the way the proportions work out. But if you find you end up with more than you want in one sitting, you can store it away in the freezer for quite a while, and essentially, I think I a little more than I should have there.
And in preparation, we put our ice cubes right in the glasses and put them right in the freezer this way, which is a little bit of a time-saving tip.
But you could store that away. I wouldn't let it sit too terribly long.
Just in preparation.
But you can store it away and enjoy a second drink soon, and it will hold up well. All right, and then of course our Campari. If you can get me a bit of ice, my dear. All right. Yeah, the juniper flavor is really prominent with this VJOP. It's great. Maybe a little bit more. Make sure we get it nice and cold. So this is as a drink, like basically all spirits drink. This is a stirred drink. No need to shake and aerate it. Should have the nice silky texture, and as usual we're going to stir for about a minute to really get it going, get some of that dilution, and also get it chilled to the right spot. And I will mention that this variation is a riff on something that was called a Negrononi. Negronino, invented by a bartender in Hong Kong, where I grew up. So, but I chose the VJOP. I think it's actually a really nice touch in this drink. All right. We have stirred. We will pour over the ice. A nice, good, healthy pour.
No double straining needed.
No double straining needed because there's no citrus
No particles.
or other kinds of particles in this one. So we just single strain, and we didn't shake it, so there's no ice chips or anything like that. Mm-hmm. So just single strain with the strainer. Mm-hmm. And there you can see our cocktails. Perhaps not the full sort of reddish hue that you might get from a standard Negroni, but more of an orange amber color, but still attractive. And then, of course, we cannot forget our garnish. Really important to express those citrus essence oils. So we will express the grapefruit oil You can even give it a wipe around, pop it in there,
Or on the side.
or on the side per your preference. And there you go, a wonderful, delicious OP Nonigroni in honor of the Negroni. Cheers, darling. Here's to La Dolce Vita. Cheers, all.
It's very good.
Yeah, that is good.